Well, thank you all for being here. My name is Chris Regan. I'm one of the property owners. I've been in Baltimore for about 20 years. Started a company called Tower Hill Development in 2001, and we've been working on mostly downtown historic redevelopment projects. Today is the 2-year anniversary of our closing on this property, so we're really thrilled that we're here, and we've got an incredible staff that has worked to reactivate this building in a way that I think some important Baltimore leaders thought this building could be utilized for going back 40 years ago. So they asked me to tell you a little bit about the history of the building, it's 105 years old. And so I want you all to imagine Pigtown in 1914. It probably looked a lot like it looks today. If you look out any of the windows around this floor, right, you can see a lot of two-story buildings. You see Carroll Camden to the south, a lot of low-rise industrial buildings. And if you can imagine an 8-story building rising in the middle of what Jeff just described in 1914, that probably would have been a pretty amazing sight. I'm going to read you a little bit about, from an article in The Sun, January 11th, 1914, Jacob Epstein, proprietor of the Baltimore Bargain House, provided a contract for this, quote, monster building, probably the largest construction contract in Maryland at the time. The cost is withheld, but it is said to be in the neighborhood of $400,000. That's about $1 a square foot. So we'd love to have those times again. Interestingly, the contract was awarded to a man named John Waters, and this is a January article, and they said that the building would be completed November 1 next. So that either meant 11 months or 23 months, I'm not sure. And there was a building on site that needed to be torn down. So after they tore it down, they had to put 1,800 concrete piles into the ground to support the weight of the building. So I'm just trying to imagine the amount of manpower and the amount of concrete that they would have needed to produce to just build the pilings, never mind do nearly 9 to 10 acres of buildings here. So the Baltimore Bargain House had become a huge retail and commercial, they sold wholesale goods. That was the word I was looking for. They sold wholesale goods to Southerners who had shops, five and dime shops, etc. So while they did have some retail shops over by where the arena is, this building was designed to store all their wholesale goods. So with a massive amount of their goods in here, they wanted to make sure it was safe. So according to the article, every mechanical device for safety and ease and economy in the handling of goods will be installed. There will be a sprinkler throughout the building. It will be supplied with 6 fast, high-power elevators, mechanical conveyors for handling freight, and steel chutes for the rapid movement of goods from upper to lower floors. I don't know if that sounds familiar to any of you, but I think a little company called Amazon is building similar buildings in Baltimore today, albeit with probably a little bit more technology. There will be a driveway inside the building, 60 by 100 feet, for the use of the electric trucks, which Mr. Epstein is already putting into use in his business. They are taking the place of horse-drawn vehicles, which with the horses are being disposed of as rapidly as convenient. The great new warehouse will also have spur tracks inside connecting directly with the Baltimore and Ohio tracks, and 3 freight cars can be unloaded at the same time. So this was a big deal for a warehouse building. if you look up, you see these sprinkler lines. The actual support brackets were formed into the actual original concrete work at the time, which I can assure you was probably no small feat to get these perfectly aligned as they were building this building. Sprinklers were not commonplace, right? But he had all of probably his goods in this building, and you know, to take the chance of losing them, or maybe he was even thinking about his employees at the time, which was an important issue. Job safety was actually being talked about throughout America at the time. So it was pretty incredible building that he was thinking ahead on. Let me talk a little bit about the people who were involved. So Mr. Epstein started his business in the 1870s. He came here as an immigrant from Lithuania, and he and his brother and brother-in-law, and I'm sure lots of other family members, participated in him building the business up to a revenue of about $16 million a year at the time that this was built. And he also started to collect art at the time. And as one of our guests here can tell you, I think there's a portrait in the Baltimore Museum of Art, as he was one of the original trustees, and I believe donated a lot of his artwork to the museum. And he also had Joseph Evans Sperry, who was his architect. He had built a number of buildings downtown, and as a prominent Baltimorean would have had a prominent architect. And Mr. Sperry designed the Bromo Seltzer building, along with a number of other downtown buildings, synagogues, etc. And I would love to look up the papers to see what the contract was like, or what some of the letters were like about Sperry needing to actually design a warehouse building in Pigtown. So, you know, I'm not sure what his ego was like with regard to that, but I'm sure it was an interesting conversation. So fast forward to the 70s, businesses are leaving town. This building is being used by the Raleigh Clothing Company, and a gentleman named Robert Embry, who many of you know runs the Able Foundation, envisions this building as being a place for Baltimore businesses that might otherwise leave to call home. So light manufacturing, you know, certainly not innovation companies at the time, but nonetheless companies that maintain jobs and that they hoped could keep some of these businesses in Baltimore. So he got a grant from the federal government. They built the parking garage, they modernized the building at the time, and unfortunately, I don't think the building ever turned into what they wanted it to be. However, I think Mr. Embry is happy to know that we are now trying to do the same thing. Yesterday we held Development Day for Baltimore Innovation Week. We had about 500 people here who are all involved in Baltimore's innovation economy. That was on the 8th floor, which you're free to take a walk up to the 8th floor. It's one entire floor with great views, beautiful concrete architecture. And so we're really looking to remake this building as a place for the creative class, the makers of Baltimore who have businesses, to call home and to host events like this. So thank you all for coming, and enjoy the day.